Hi, and welcome to part 2 of the Complete Beginner's Guide to Pot Limit Omaha for card runners. Today we're going to look at flop play, following on from the first video that I did on pre-flop play. Now, Omaha is a post-flop game. That's basically where we make all our money in Omaha. You can be a fairly average pre-flop player in terms of our hand selections, but if you play exceptionally well post-flop, then you will still be a profitable player, which is unlike Hold'em, for example, where our pre-flop selections really dictate our post-flop results. It's much harder to obviously improve our hand in Hold'em than it is in Omaha, where obviously with 4 cards and a lot more combinations, then we've got a lot more chance to improve, and the textures of the board can change our equities very, very quickly. So today we're going to look at when we're going to bet on the flop. That's basically when it's good to bet, when it's good to check. There's a lot of situations in Omaha where we seemingly have a good hand, but it could still be a better option to check back when we consider our opponent's range. We're also going to be looking at why we're betting in each individual situation, which is obviously just exploring the reasons why we're betting a little bit further, and then how much to bet. Now the reasons that we look at in why to bet will inform us how much to bet. Now the things to consider in flop play in Pot Limit Omaha, these are not in any particular order, but I think they're all important to a varying degree. The stack size and the stack to pot ratio are important. The stack to pot ratio is simply the ratio of our stack in relation to the pot. So if we've got $25 in our stack and the pot is $2.50, then we have an SPR of 10. If we have $15 in our stack and the pot is $15, then we have an SPR of 1. And obviously the lower the SPR, the more straightforward our decisions can be. And the main, I suppose, example of that is when, for example, we have ace-ace XX pre-flop, and we get a third of our stack in, which means that when we come to the flop, if we're facing one opponent, then we'll have one pot size bet left, and we can just pot it regardless. So really in that kind of situation, ranges are completely irrelevant, and the board texture is irrelevant. We're just going to shove in that particular situation, which means that the stack pot ratio has basically dictated how we're going to play in that particular situation. The number of opponents is obviously important. Because we've got 4 cards instead of 2, the number of combinations of hands that are out there increases exponentially. So, when we're facing 2, 3, 4 opponents, then we've really got to slow down with our C bets. We're not going to attack any boards and bluff, particularly in those situations. We're just going to play pretty much A, B, C. We're also going to consider our ranges. Mainly our opponent's ranges in terms of what they could possibly have when we're looking at the board texture. But also we've got to look at our perceived range as well. And again, if we go back to the ace-ace example, when we 4-bet a lot in Omaha, most of the time we're going to have ace-ace XX, especially at lower stakes when there's not nearly as much emphasis needs to be put onto being deceptive with our plays. We can just play pretty straightforward. We don't have to worry about metagame and varying our plays too much. We can just play straightforward in terms of the intrinsic strength of our hands. So we've got to consider basically that our opponents will have an idea of our range, and we've got to adjust our flop play and our post-flop play accordingly. And then obviously we've just got to consider our equity in the situation that we're in on the flop. We've got to have a good idea of things like how many outs we've got when we've got a wrap, how many outs we've got when we've got a flush and things like that. They're all kind of standard things that you have to study away from the table, so that when we get into those situations on the flop, then we're going to know exactly what to do.